reality is just not even close to the reality that is revealed to us in the physical space and time, where there are macroscopic objects, and the macroscopic objects are separate from each other. And so, also the world of computers, the bit of the computer is separate from the other bit. There is nothing, the bits don't have anything in common with the other bits. So we create numbers with those bits, but each bit is independent and has to have only two states, 0 or 1. So we use physics to create this logical thing that we have invented, because we have invented the bits. The bits are not in the computer. If you open up the computer and say, do you see bits moving around? And there are no bits moving around. There are signals moving around, but those signals are structured in such a way that they carry distinguishable states that you then can use to do whatever we do with the computers. But those states are not the same states like an electron is to the field. Those bits are our creation that is imposed on matter, and it works until matter is deterministic, behaves in predictable ways. If you raise the temperature of the computer too much, the computer stops working, because that distinction that we have put into matter can no longer be maintained. So it's our construction. It's a construction of consciousness. It's not a construction in the computer. The computer doesn't know anything about bits. You see the subtlety here, because we think the reality is made in a certain way, but in fact, we are imposing a certain type of distinction there are mental distinctions and conscious distinctions that then we attribute to reality. Probabilities, for example, can only happen if you are conscious, because only a conscious being wants to predict what will happen in the future, especially in a reality like the classical reality, which is deterministic. In a deterministic reality, there are no probabilities, there are only certainties. The probability are a lack of knowing about something that if we knew, we could predict the future. And therefore, there would be no probability. We would predict exactly what will happen. So probabilities already include the existence of consciousness in the definition. Quantum physics is all about probabilities. It's not about physical variables. It's all about probability.
When you talk about reality, and obviously this is a concept you can talk about conceptually, but I'd like you as a physicist to explain to us what you mean when you say reality is not what we think it is. And you can go as micro or as macro as you'd like. And I think the beauty of what you talk about is that it includes the micro in the macro and the macro in the micro.
The fundamental reality is the reality of our inner experience. And yet that inner experience is not separate from the material or the mental aspect. That inner experience is part of what we call spirit, the spiritual reality. In reality, there are three aspects of reality which are intertwined. They cannot be separated. The material, which is the body, the mental, which is actually the prediction of what might happen in the future. That's what actually quantum physics does. It gives you probabilities. But then it's the spiritual nature that has the experience of that reality, and also the free will decisions that by knowing the probabilities, they pick whatever they want with free will. So we construct the future by the collective decisions that we fields, not we bodies, we fields make. In other words, the deeper reality is the reality of meaning and experience. That's the deep, and free will and the self-knowing that we get out of it, and the love, the aspect in which all those three aspects are superimposed. They exist together. The body is like red, the mind is like blue, green, and the spirit is like blue, right? When they combine together, they create white, the white light, right? So the three together. But where you have red and green, that superposition is quantum and classical, a type of information which is the one that would describe living systems. A cell works with the principles of quantum physics and classical physics. Computer works with only the principle of classical physics. That's the body, the center of the body is that type. The center of the quantum reality is actually the quantum state, which actually allow you to predict possibilities in the future, which then the spirit decides. And the spirit, the center of the spirit is the meaning of the information. Where the mind and the spirit overlap, there is qualia, the experience. That experience can be described with the quantum state of a field. But that description is not a description of the experience, is only a map. The territory is the experience. The map is just a quantum state, which is a vector in Hilbert space, blah, 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 blah. But that is a map.
Right. And our limitation is that we identify our ego, we identify with our body. So the reality that we have and that we construct the world with is, well, I see this, I touch that, this is my job, this is my political party, this is the color of my skin, this is my religion, this is reality, this is who I am. But what you have said is that that way of thinking and that over-identification of the ego with basically our sensory system, right? You said that it can lead us to censor the parts of ourselves that actually give us the true reality of what we can perceive from the body, the mind, and the spirit. Is this the satiety, which is spelled like deity, but it has an S?
Yeah, they say the satiety is this field with these properties. You see, so consciousness cannot be seen as an entity. Consciousness is a property of a satiety. Satiety, I use the word satiety because quantum field, which is the quantum aspect of that reality, is only a portion of that reality, which is the only portion that physics recognize, which then is described in quantum states with all the equations and blah, blah, blah. But that portion has eliminated the deeper aspects, which are the body and most important, the spiritual aspects, which are the fact that we have experience and the fact that from the experience we get meaning, get self-knowing. The meaning is the essence of the self-knowing.
One of the most practical applications of your spiritual experience and this really approach to understanding reality is you talk about how the destruction of the environment is one example of us not being in alignment with how the sum of the parts, right, are bigger than the whole. That the notion of a continuous cooperation as a species is actually consistent. And obviously, there's so many, the politicization of climate change is a ridiculous conversation that we don't need to get into. But the notion of what does it mean, not just to be in alignment with yourself, which we're very good at in capitalist Western societies, but what does it mean to be in alignment with not only those around us, but with the species as a whole? Can you talk about how this understanding, I literally quoted this. You said that when our rationality is uniquely informed by the principles of materialism, reductionism, and survival of the fittest, it can only lead to an unbridled competition, racism, and war. So you talk about this kind of competition and racism, war, and the environment as consequences of what happens as a species when we are not aligned with true reality.
Yeah, but because the true reality starts with what is the purpose of one. Of course, you can say, well, but who can tell the purpose of one? Of course, I cannot tell the purpose of one, but by looking at the deepest aspect of ourselves, we can infer that one wants to do exactly what we want, which is to know itself. We want to know who we are. We are here. I mean, the deepest aspects of human beings is we want to understand who we are. Knowing yourself, is in, the temple of Apollo, in Delphi, is in the history of humanity, but even before, the Vedas talk about this same principle. So I start with that principle. I start one, the totality of what exists is dynamic, holistic, and before I didn't finish, and I put 1/3 condition on one. One wants to know itself. So the wanting to know itself, the wanting is what then reflects into our will, our free will, because we also want to know ourselves, but we have to have the will to do that and the capacity to do that. And to know itself, one must be conscious. So consciousness is a necessity of the fundamental principle, which I consider a postulate. You have to believe it or not, but because you cannot prove it. But then from there, you can see that quantum physics emerges naturally from those properties.
That's a really important point, that so many of us think of quantum physics and all of these like subjects that not everybody understands as something outside of us, when the fact is it's just the attempt to articulate a deeper reality that the mystics have known for thousands of years. You experienced at midnight outside of Lake Tahoe, which no one knows why. But I think that is the thing that also people who have psychedelic or transcendental experiences, they describe a very, very similar explanation of our purpose here. People who have near-death experiences, who leave this realm and have experiences of consciousness that also include 360-degree vision, which isn't even a thing unless you remove your consciousness from the body that it's in. So the fact that we're seeing all of these things align, you give it such validity because you are a man of science. You are a person who has invented the things that structure the way we understand a biologically mechanical world. And yet you have this insight to be able to say, guess what? There's something that you can't even see or touch. You can feel it, but not with your senses. It's something deeper that very few will touch, but our purpose here is to keep looking for it.
Science is about knowing, right? So, why is so important science? Because it is knowing outside what is outside, but science today has forgotten there is also an interiority, there is an inside. And in fact, scientism erase the inside. There is nothing there. We are only a machine, right? If we are just a machine, there is only outside. There is nothing inside. That is the fundamental problem. But if you start with one dynamic holistic wants to know itself, and when one knows itself, it creates a field. It creates what it knows, because knowing and and existing are two words for the same thing. When one knows itself, you bring into existence what it knows, and so knowing is existence. Ontology is in the knowing, in the meaning, in the interiority. That's the point. And then fields, then there are fields of fields, blah, blah, blah. It's a complicated world. But the point is that for me to know myself, I need to know the others like myself. That's what cooperation is. I cannot know the others like myself if I don't cooperate. And what is that allows us to cooperate? Love. Love. And what is love? Love is the taste of meaning. Love from the inside is the taste of meaning. The more meaning, the more taste. The 10,000 more powerful love that I ever tasted was the meaning of me experience in Tahoe. That was me, my meaning. Incredible love. That's me.
You sound like a deadhead. You sound like someone who wants to travel the world just spreading love and good times.
But the point, but from the outside, what is love from the outside? From the outside, love is a force that brings into resonance the interiorities of our fields. That is not classical in resonance. It's not pendulums that oscillate in synchrony. It is the inner state, which is the meaning. That meaning becomes the same meaning, and it is love that brings the meaning to be the same in the various fields as a force. What is the equivalent from the seen by the physicists? I don't know, but I suspect possibility gravitational force. Why? Because the gravitational force is the only universal force. It's only attractive, and it is the smallest force. But that smallest force can create stars out of which we create the nucleons, which cannot be created in any other way.